My name is Walter Grayson, and I am 68 years old. At my daughter's engagement dinner, my wife squeezed my knee under the table and leaned close enough that I could feel her breath against my ear. "We need to leave before dessert," she whispered. I turned to look at her, my fork still halfway to my mouth. "Why? What's wrong?" She just shook her head, her eyes darting toward the kitchen doorway. She wouldn't say another word until we were outside, standing beside our car in the restaurant parking lot, the valet still holding the door open behind us. Finally, she turned to face me, her hands trembling. "Walter," she said, "did you actually read the trust paperwork before you signed it, or did you just trust him?" What she told me next changed everything I thought I knew about my own family. I spent 43 years building Grayson Millwork from a two-man cabinet shop into one of the largest custom furniture manufacturers in the Carolinas. My wife Diane and I raised two children in a modest brick house before the business ever made us comfortable, and we never forgot where we came from. Our daughter, Emily, became a school teacher, married a good man, and never asked us for a thing. Our son Cole was different. Cole was the golden child, the one we always believed would take over the company. We paid for his business degree. We funded his first two failed startups without complaint. And 8 months ago, at his insistence, I signed papers restructuring 60% of Grayson Millwork's ownership into a new holding entity, one that Cole swore would protect the company from estate taxes when I eventually passed it down. He called it generational protection planning. He brought in his fiance's father, a smooth-talking man named Preston Villard who called himself a wealth strategist, and between the two of them, they walked me through documents so dense with legal language that I simply nodded along and signed where they told me to sign. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. Cole's engagement dinner to Preston's daughter, Ashley. The private room at the steakhouse was full of Ashley's family and friends, all of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Cole stood at the head of the table looking more like Preston's protege than my son, his hand resting on Ashley's shoulder while Preston held court, telling stories about vineyards in Napa and a boat he kept in Charleston. I noticed Cole barely looked at me all evening. Every time I tried to catch his eye, Ashley would touch his arm and redirect his attention to one of her father's associates. Diane had gone to find the restroom near the private room's entrance, and on her way back, she said, she'd passed an open door to what looked like a small office the restaurant used for private meetings. Preston was inside with two men she didn't recognize, and spread across the desk was a document with the Grayson Millwork letterhead at the top. She said she only caught a glimpse, but the words majority control and restructured board jumped out at her before Preston noticed her and pulled the door shut. I sat in the car in that parking lot with the engine off, the valet lights blinking red and gold across the windshield, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. 43 years. Every callus on my hands, every missed Christmas morning spent solving supplier problems, every dollar I'd poured back into that company instead of into vacations or new cars, all of it built for my children, and now my own son had brought a stranger into the middle of it, a man I barely knew, showing him documents about my company's board structure at his own engagement party while I sat 2 rooms away eating a filet mignon he didn't even offer to pay for. I didn't sleep that night. At 5 in the morning, I sat in my home office, the same room where I'd drawn up the very first business plan for Grayson Millwork on a legal pad in 1983, and I logged into the county business registry using my laptop. It took less than 20 minutes to find what I needed. The new holding company Cole had set up 8 months ago, the one meant to protect the family legacy, was called Ridgemont Capital Partners, and according to the filing, the majority stakeholder, 61%, was not me, and it was not Cole. It was Preston Villard. I called Cole's cell phone at 7 that morning. He picked up on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep and irritation. "Dad, it's early. We need to talk. Now. Can it wait? I've got a meeting with Preston at 9 about the Charlotte expansion." "It's about Preston," I said, "and it's about the fact that he owns 61% of my company." There was a long silence on the line, longer than it should have been for an innocent man. "Dad, it's not what you think. There's a structure here you don't fully understand. Preston's firm provided the bridge financing for the tax restructuring. It's completely standard. Let me come by this afternoon, and I'll walk you through the whole thing." He arrived at 2 o'clock with a leather folder under his arm, wearing the same confident half-smile he used to give me when he was 16 and explaining why the car had a new dent in it. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, opened the folder, and began speaking in the exact clipped, rehearsed cadence of a man who had practiced this conversation in a mirror. He talked about pass-through liability shields and stepped-up basis and intergenerational transfer taxes, throwing around numbers and acronyms with total confidence. It was, I noticed, almost note for note the kind of performance I imagine a con man gives right before he asks you to wire him money. I let him finish. I did not interrupt. When he was done, he closed the folder, folded his hands, and looked at me with an expression that expected gratitude. "Cole," I said quietly, "I built cabinets with these two hands for 15 years before I ever hired an employee. I understand basis. I understand liability. What I don't understand is why a man I met 4 times owns more of my company than I do." His confident expression cracked for just a second before Ashley walked in through the side door. She had a key, apparently, something I hadn't known, carrying a box of pastries from a bakery downtown, as if this were a social visit. She set the box down, glanced at the folder on the table, and immediately positioned herself beside Cole, her hand on his forearm. "Walter," she said, her voice syrupy and wounded, "I really hope you're not accusing my father of something. He's given up so much time to help this family. Do you know how insulting it is to suggest he has some kind of hidden agenda?" "I didn't accuse anyone of anything," I said. "I asked a question." "You went digging through public filings," Cole said, his voice rising now that he had backup. "You didn't trust me enough to just ask. That says a lot, Dad." I felt the same twist in my gut that I imagine every father feels the moment he realizes his child has learned to weaponize guilt instead of earning trust. They stood there, shoulder to shoulder, looking at me not with the shame of people caught in a lie, but with the mild annoyance of people inconvenienced by suspicion. I had built and sold enough machinery in my life to know when I was being sold something, and I knew, in that moment, that if I pushed further right now, they would simply close ranks and destroy whatever evidence remained. So I did something I am not proud of, but which I have never regretted. I folded. I let my shoulders drop. I rubbed my eyes like a tired old man. "You're right," I said, my voice deliberately weak. "I'm sorry. I've been feeling foggy lately, and I let my imagination get away from me. Forgive me." The transformation in the room was instant. Cole's shoulders relaxed. Ashley offered a small, forgiving smile, the kind you give a scolded dog. "It's all right, Dad," Cole said, patting my shoulder on his way out the door. "We know you're just looking out for us." They left with the pastries still sitting untouched on my counter. I watched Cole's truck pull out of the driveway, and once it disappeared around the corner, I picked up my phone and called a man I'd known for 30 years, a retired forensic accountant named Harold Beeks, who'd once helped me untangle a supplier's fraudulent invoicing scheme. "Harold," I said, "I need you to look into a man named Preston Villard," quietly. 3 days later, Harold sat across from me at his kitchen table with a stack of printouts. "Walter," he said, "this is worse than a bad business deal. Preston Villard isn't a wealth strategist. He's been sued twice for securities fraud, both cases settled quietly. He's currently under investigation by the state for running what looks like a Ponzi structure through 3 different shell entities. He owes money to people who do not send polite collection letters. I'm talking about men connected to an underground lending operation out of Miami. He needs cash, fast, and he needs it clean." My stomach dropped. "And Ridgemont Capital?" "Ridgemont isn't protecting your company from taxes, Walter. It's protecting Preston from his creditors. He's using Grayson Millworks' assets and cash flow as collateral to buy himself time. And there's something else." Harold slid a folder across the table. "I found a pattern of transfers, about $40,000 a month, moving out of your company's accounts under a line item labeled Strategic Consulting Fees. It's going straight into an account tied to Villard Advisory Group. Your son authorized every single one of these transfers personally." I sat there staring at the numbers, feeling the floor of my own life shift beneath me. My son wasn't a naive kid who'd been fooled by a smooth talker. He was a willing participant, moving money out of the company we'd built together to bail out his future father-in-law. "There's one more thing," Harold said, his voice dropping. "I don't think Villard plans to pay this back. I think he plans to default, declare Ridgemont insolvent, and since Ridgemont holds 61% of Grayson Millwork, that default drags your company's assets down with it. When creditors come to collect from Ridgemont, they can legally seize company property to satisfy the debt. Your factory, your equipment, your accounts, all of it." I asked Harold how long we had. "The state investigators are already circling Villard. I'd guess 60, maybe 90 days before this collapses one way or another. The question is whether it collapses on his terms or yours. I decided, right there, that it would collapse on mine. For the next several weeks, I played the role of a confused, aging man losing his grip. I misplaced my keys in front of Ashley on purpose, letting her find them in the refrigerator where I'd hidden them, and watched her whisper something to Cole afterward, both of them exchanging a look I recognized instantly, the look of people quietly building a case. I called Cole by his cousin's name at dinner one night and apologized profusely for the confusion. I let them believe exactly what they wanted to believe, because I needed them comfortable enough to stop watching me closely. Meanwhile, at night, after Diane had gone to sleep, I worked with Harold and a lawyer I trusted implicitly, a woman named Renata Cho who had handled every major contract Grayson Millwork ever signed. We moved my personal assets, my house, my retirement accounts, a rental property Diane and I owned outright, into a trust completely separated from the company and from Ridgemont's exposure. We also discovered, buried in the original transfer paperwork Cole had pushed me to sign, a clause allowing majority shareholders to call an emergency vote to remove the founding CEO in the event of demonstrated incapacity. I realized, with a chill, that this clause hadn't been an accident. It had been the plan from the very beginning. Cole and Preston weren't just protecting themselves from creditors. They were laying the groundwork to have me declared unfit and legally pushed out of my own company, so that when the pension and benefit obligations came due, they could point to a confused, incapacitated old man as the one who'd mismanaged everything, while Cole quietly took the reins with Preston controlling the money behind him. Renata found something else in the small print, something that made even her go pale. There was a rider attached to the operating agreement that used my personal signature forged, we later confirmed through a handwriting expert, to guarantee a private loan Preston had taken out against Ridgemont's shares. If Preston defaulted, the debt would legally transfer to me, personally, not to the company. To me, Walter Grayson, as an individual. My house, my savings, everything Diane and I had left, all of it exposed to satisfy a stranger's gambling debts and bad investments, because my own son had signed my name to a document I had never seen. I remember sitting in my truck outside Renata's office after she told me this, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I thought about the boy who used to ride in the passenger seat of my delivery van when he was 7 years old, begging me to let him honk the horn. I thought about how that boy had somehow become a man willing to forge his father's signature and mortgage his father's entire life to save the skin of a man who called himself his future father-in-law. I decided I needed proof of intent, not just proof of the scheme. So I built a trap. I drafted a document on the company's official letterhead, using language that would sound irresistible to a desperate man. I titled it, Voluntary Transfer of Founder Authority Grayson Millwork, and it laid out, in convincing legal detail, my supposed decision to step down as CEO immediately and hand full operational and signing authority to Cole, citing my ongoing health concerns. I left it unsigned on my office desk, along with an old fountain pen Diane had given me decades ago, and I made sure Cole knew I'd been drafting something important in there, though I refused to say what. Hidden inside a hollowed-out set of encyclopedias on my bookshelf, exactly like the ones my father used to own, I installed a small camera the size of a shirt button, angled directly at the desk, streaming to an encrypted app on my phone. That Thursday night, Diane and I quietly checked into a motel 20 minutes away, telling no one. We sat on the edge of the stiff motel bed watching the live feed on my phone screen, the glow of the empty office lighting up the dark room. For nearly 2 hours, nothing happened. Diane rested her head against my shoulder, her breathing shallow, clearly hoping that our son would simply walk past that open door and go to sleep like a decent man. At midnight, the office door creaked open. Cole and Ashley slipped inside together, moving with a quiet, practiced coordination that told me this wasn't the first time they'd planned something like this. Cole walked straight to the desk and picked up the document, his eyes scanning it fast in the dim lamplight. A slow smile spread across his face. "He actually drafted it," Cole whispered, turning to Ashley. "He's handing it to us. We don't even have to force anything." Ashley snatched the paper from his hands, reading quickly, her mouth curling into a satisfied grin. "He really is losing it," she said, and laughed, a sharp, delighted sound that made my chest ache in a way I hadn't expected. "This is perfect. We tell him it was his idea, We get him to sign it Sunday at your mother's birthday lunch, in front of everyone, so there are witnesses that it was voluntary. Then Monday, my father finalizes the loan restructuring using Ridgemont's full authority, and none of this ever touches us. And once he signs, Cole said, setting the paper back down and lining the pen up beside it with chilling precision, we can quietly start the incapacity paperwork too, just in case anyone at the bank asks questions later. We say he's been declining for months. We have witnesses, the forgetting names, the lost keys, all of it. Nobody will blink. Diane broke down silently beside me in that motel room, her tears falling onto the back of my hand as she listened to our son calmly plan to strip his own father of his mind, his money, and his company in a single weekend. I said nothing. I simply watched the screen, feeling whatever remaining tenderness I'd carried for that boy freeze solid inside my chest. Let him have his Sunday, I whispered to Diane. It will be the last thing he ever plans in that house. Sunday arrived warm and bright, the kind of day that felt cruel given what I knew was coming. Diane's sister had organized a small birthday lunch for Diane at Cole and Ashley's new townhouse, and Preston had insisted on being there too, bringing along two of his business associates I didn't recognize, men in expensive suits who spent the whole afternoon murmuring into their phones. I wore my oldest cardigan and leaned on a cane I didn't need, letting my hand tremble slightly as I greeted people, playing the part of a man slipping further from himself with every passing week. Cole brought out the folder after the cake was served, setting it down beside my plate with theatrical gentleness. "Dad," he said, loud enough for the small crowd to hear, "I know things have been confusing for you lately. Ashley and I just want to make things easier. There's something here that would really simplify everything for you." He opened the folder and slid the document toward me, along with the pen. "You don't have to worry about the company anymore. Just sign here, and let me take care of everything." I looked down at the paper. I looked up at my son, and at Ashley standing behind him with her arms crossed, wearing the expression of a woman watching a business transaction close successfully. I looked at Preston, leaning against the kitchen island with a glass of wine, watching me with the patient, predatory calm of a man who has done this before. I picked up the pen. I felt every eye at that table lock onto my hand. Then I closed my fist around the barrel and snapped it in half. Ink burst across the tablecloth, spreading in a dark stain across the document beneath it. "You are not getting my company," I said, my voice suddenly clear and level, carrying none of the tremor I'd rehearsed for weeks. "And you are not getting my house, or my savings, or the rest of my life." The room went silent. Cole's mouth fell open. "Dad, what?" "I know about Ridgemont," I said, cutting him off. "I know Preston owns 61% through you. I know he's been draining $40,000 a month out of the company I built to pay off a Ponzi scheme collapsing under him in 3 states. I know you forged my signature on a loan guarantee that would have bankrupted your mother and me the moment his creditors came calling. And I know exactly what you and Ashley were planning to do to me this weekend." Preston set his wine glass down very slowly, his face draining of color. Ashley took a step back from Cole, as though putting distance between herself and a man on fire. "You have no proof of any of that," Preston said, his voice tight. "I have 3 weeks of forensic banking records," I said, "a handwriting analysis on the forged guarantee, and a video recording of the two of you standing in my office at midnight, discussing exactly how you planned to have me declared incompetent." I nodded toward the front door. It opened, and Harold walked in first, followed by 2 men in dark suits who did not need to introduce themselves. Preston's associates near the kitchen quietly slipped out the back door, which told me everything I needed to know about how much they'd known. "Preston Villard," one of the agents said, "we need to speak with you about Villard Advisory Group and several ongoing complaints filed with the State Securities Division." Preston's composure shattered instantly. He looked at Cole with something close to panic. "You told me he had no idea," he hissed. Cole didn't answer. He was staring at me, his face pale, his carefully built world collapsing in real time in front of his fiancée's family and mine. "Cole," I said, and my voice, for the first time in weeks, did not shake at all. "You are removed from every position you hold at Grayson Millwork, effective this moment. The money you funneled to Preston was drawn from company accounts under fraudulent authorization. That makes you criminally liable, not just embarrassingly disloyal. And because the down payment on this townhouse came directly from a company-secured loan tied to your employment, which is now terminated for cause, you are also in default on the mortgage. You have until tomorrow evening to remove your belongings. Ashley spun toward Cole, her earlier sweetness gone entirely. You told me your father was too far gone to ever figure this out, she snapped. You told me we were safe. Ashley, I am not losing my future over your incompetence, she said, and she walked out the front door without looking back, leaving her own engagement lunch behind her. The agents led Preston out in handcuffs while his two associates were already being questioned outside by additional officers who'd been waiting quietly down the street. Cole stood alone in the wreckage of his fiancée's kitchen, the cake half-eaten on the counter, and for the first time since he was a small boy, I watched him cry, without an audience to perform for. Dad, please, he said. I'll fix it. I'll pay it back. Just don't do this. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the boy on my knee, the boy who used to fall asleep in the back of my truck on the drive home from the shop. That boy had been gone for a long time, replaced slowly by someone I no longer recognized. You didn't just try to take my company, I said quietly. You tried to take my mind from me while I was still alive to feel it happen. There is no fixing that. I turned, took Diane's hand, and we walked out together into the warm afternoon sun, leaving our son standing alone in a house that no longer belonged to him. The following weeks brought a swift public reckoning. Preston's fraud made regional news, dragging Ridgemont Capital and, by association, Cole's name into every article. His engagement was over within days. The bank foreclosed on the townhouse within a month. I called an all-staff meeting at Grayson Millwork and told our employees the full truth that money meant for the company had been diverted and that I personally guaranteed every dollar would be restored from my own accounts, along with a bonus contribution to make up for the stress I'd put them through. Grown men who'd worked the shop floor for 20 years shook my hand with tears in their eyes. Cole reached out exactly once more, on a rainy night in late autumn, showing up soaked and shaking at our front door, asking if he could just sleep in the garage. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at the son I had raised and the stranger he had become, and I told him, gently but without hesitation, that some doors, once closed, are closed for the sake of everyone still standing on the right side of them. Then I shut the door, and for the first time in a year, I slept the entire night through. If you've ever had to protect your peace from someone who shared your blood, I want you to know you're not alone, and you're not wrong for choosing yourself. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to make a hard choice like this one. And if this story meant something to you, stay with me, there are more stories like it waiting for you here. Real love isn't proven by what you hand someone, but by what they become while holding it. Walter didn't lose a son to a scheme he'd already lost him to entitlement, long before the papers were signed. The gift wasn't the company or the house. It was the chance to build something honest with your own two hands. Protect your peace, keep your eyes open, and never mistake blind giving for love. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while hopefully leaving you with a genuine, positive life lesson.